Good morning, Eddie.
Morning, Razor.
Yesterday, news from the club that Martin Dubravka had signed a new contract. At one stage in January, it looked as though he could be on his way, but now he's going to be with you beyond this season. How pleased are you to get it sorted?
Yeah, pleased to sign Martin to a new contract. Thought it was important in January. We definitely didn't want to destabilise the team or the group with a departure in a position that we couldn't afford that to happen. So, delighted that he's staying.
And now that all this is sorted, the certainty about his future, how much do you think that will help him? Not that you would necessarily have known about the stuff going on behind the scenes, given the way that he's played since coming back into the team.
Yeah, I don't see a change in Martin. He's very experienced, especially during that month of January, which was probably the most challenging time for him because there was, as you say, a bit of uncertainty over his future. He responded really well to that. Partly down to his experience, and he's probably seen all of these situations before in his career. So, it's over now and he can just focus on his football.
And there's also been a contract extension for Emil Kraft. Why was it important for you as a club to keep him here for another season?
Well, I think with Emil, firstly his character and his attitude stands out. Very reliable, consistent performer, but his versatility, his ability to play different roles is so important for a small squad to have players that can cover in various positions. And I think whenever he's played this year, Emil's been very, very good. So I think he fully deserves his contract extension.
You haven't had Sven Botman for the last couple of matches. Is he fit and available for this weekend?
Don't think he'll be fit and available for this weekend. We're going to have to see how things stand over the weekend for next week. That's bar a remarkable recovery for this weekend. He's making progress, and he's making good progress, but just not as quickly as we wanted it to.
So he's on track, there's been no setback or anything?
Yeah, no, he's very much on track, just, not quite ready.
And how's Joe Linton getting on in his recovery from injury?
Doing really well, pushing, as Joe always does. We just need to make sure we introduce him at the right time.
Last weekend was obviously such a disappointment. You weren't like yourselves. How certain are you that there won't be a repeat of that in the weeks ahead with all the big games coming up, taking into account the quality of your opposition last Saturday?
Well, there's no certainties in football. That I can say with no doubt. But I think there's an understanding that we didn't perform. I think there's an understanding of what we didn't do well enough. We've certainly covered that with the players this week, and we expect a big response.
And Nottingham Forest, finally, they've continued their incredible run into this part of the season. There's obviously lots of reasons why, but among them is Chris Wood, 18 Premier League goals now. I'm sure you're not surprised to see him do well. You're pleased for him, I imagine. He's had an incredible season, hasn't he?
He has. I think he's been outstanding. I mean, Chris, when he came to us, helped us in a really difficult situation. Fighting relegation, we felt we needed a focal point in that position. Someone who could take a lot of pressure off us as a team, and give us a physical presence. Thought he did all those things. I thought he was outstanding for the team. Probably often underestimated how much he affected our style and our play that enabled us to stay in the league. And he was an ever-present and did really well. And then, of course, with Callum's return to fitness and Alex's arrival, he ended up moving on, and just delighted for him on a personal level because he's a great character, gave everything for us. Regularly, I can remember him doing so much for the team, filling in positions, sprinting back, doing things that centre-forwards don't normally do. He's still doing that for Nottingham Forest, but he's scoring a lot of goals as well, and a different variety of goals. I think that's the big plus for him. Headers, goals with his feet, goals on counter-attacks. Really pleased for him.
Thanks, Reza. Keith?
Eddie, on Sven, do you need to take extra care given previous with his knee?
I don't think particularly, Keith. I think it's a totally different injury to the knee that he had previously. We'll just judge the injury in isolation. As soon as he's ready and fit, then of course we'll look to get him back involved as quickly as possible. If anything, it helps his knee to strengthen, and he'll be spending a lot of time in the gym to make sure he's fully fit when he returns.
How's Dan Byrne now?
Dan's good, yeah. Dan's trained this week, no problems.
Okay. And any other injury issues on top of the ones you've already mention ahead of?
Not that I can think of.
No. When you look at the last two league results performances at home, and you compare that to the home performance against Arsenal in the Cup, how important is it that this Sunday you get an Arsenal performance and not a Bournemouth or Fulham?
Yeah, I think it's vitally important that we perform. It's vitally important that we show the energy and desire needed to win this game. This will be a very difficult match for us. Nottingham Forest have been excellent on the road this year. They've been consistent. They have a way of playing, regardless of what system they play. They have a style and a way of playing that is very difficult to play against. So we don't underestimate the challenge and the strengths they have in their game. But for us, I want to see a much more vibrant performance than the home games that you mentioned there. I want to see us attack. I want to see us be very much ourselves and be a real goal threat in the game. And I want to see our attacking players express themselves in a really good way. And of course, learning from Manchester City, I want to see us really aggressive off the ball and returning to our very best.
And obviously, a season is full of sort of mixed performances. There are ups and downs, but can you put your finger on why perhaps there hasn't been that vibrancy in certain games, and we have seen it in other big games, if you like?
Yeah, I always say with these things, Keith, that there's never one sole reason. It's always a combination of factors, and those combination of factors are varied and too long to talk about here. But I think we've shown that we can turn it on. We've shown that we can be a very difficult team to play against. And certainly not so long ago, we were very consistent with that. We went through a long winning run where we looked very stable. We looked very certain of ourselves. We looked clear in what we were trying to do. And it's amazing how football can work. And then in a couple of games later, we don't look that cohesive team that we had been for so long. So, of course, that's the challenges we face. The opposition will always plan for us as we plan for them. So we might have to find another way. But as long as the players are expressing themselves in the best way, and I see the performance levels of the players close to their best, I think we'll be fine.
Andy?
Morning, Eddie. We heard some kind of emotional words after Manchester City, not least from Bruno in an impassioned interview. What sort of emotions have you seen from the players in training this week? Have you seen that kind of anger and frustration about the City performance this week in training?
I'm trying to give you an honest answer here. No, I don't think we've seen anger. I think there's definitely been a sense of disappointment. Definitely that's come through. But I think we've trained... I think the attitude to training is very good. The quality, sometimes you can question. We've got a much smaller group at the moment and a weaker group with a few injuries as well. So I think that's had a slight knock-on effect. But the attitude's there, and I think the hunger is there to then put that performance to bed and put it right. And I think that's the main thing. The intention then has to be very strong to come back and show our true selves.
We've seen this squad, in difficult positions before this season, not least after Brentford, for instance. What makes this squad so good at bouncing back from setbacks, and what makes you confident that they can do so again?
Well, I think fundamentally it's always about attitude. I think behind the team is a very strong character, a group of characters, very strong will to do well, a very strong will to represent the club in the right way. I think that its heart is one of our biggest strengths. And the good, strong leadership within the player group. I think they know the expectations that they need to reach. We know we didn't do that as a group. And I think then there's a really strong will to come back and fight back. But nothing's ever easy and nothing's given to us. So then there's no guarantee. So we have to create that guarantee with how we approach this game.
Lewis Mally's had to be pretty patient this season, given the form of the midfield. It looked really, really good when he came on against Manchester City again. How much of an opportunity do you think this is to kind of solidify and really make a run for a starting berth consistently for him?
Yeah, I think he's very much in and around that position at the moment. I think his performance against Manchester City, as you say, was probably the one big positive to take from the game. There wasn't many. But he approached the game in the way that really we should have done from the start. He was brave in both phases, aggressive off the ball, brave on the ball. Fearless in his approach and played his normal game, and I thought he played very strongly.
Just finally, you've spoken about Chris Wood and being personally delighted for him. Elliot Anderson. How delighted are you for him, the fact that he's now making them up? We all knew the talent that we'd seen here at Newcastle. He's demonstrating that on a weekly basis now for Forest, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And whenever I see Nottingham Forest play, he's a player that catches my eye, of course, because I know him and know his game inside and out. And I think he's been a real creative force for them, sometimes from a deeper area. But very passionate, very gifted player. And bittersweet for me to watch him play for Nottingham Forest, because pleased for him on a personal level, but obviously disappointed for us that we lost such a great player.
Thanks, Andy. Nisha?
Morning, Eddie.
Morning.
Can we have an update on Jamal Lascelles' recovery, please?
Yeah, Jamal's continuing to work. I think he was the last player to leave yesterday with some of the staff. He works extraordinarily long hours to try and get himself fit. I think he was here till 5 o'clock again yesterday. Dedicated as you've seen a player try to return from injury. He's had various problems and little setbacks, nothing major during his recovery, but just little moments that have ended up knocking his recovery back. So he's been on the grass, he's been training individually with physios. Hasn't got beyond that stage yet, but I think he's in a pretty good place. We're probably looking towards the end of the season as a return date for him.
You've spoken already about the positive news about Martin Dubravka's contract. How has that battle for the number one spot evolved over the last few weeks between him and Nick Pope?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to describe it. I think for me, Nick's come back from an injury. Now, Nick was pushing to come back early, really. From the assessment, I think was given 6 weeks from his knee injury. I think he ended up, at 5. Did very well to come back. But Nick's just been, I think, getting his feel back. I think goalkeeping is such a unique position. Getting your rhythm back as a goalkeeper. Got good game minutes against Birmingham, which would have been great for him, and I thought he performed well. So the battle you talk about really for me is just trying to see both players at their best levels, and then of course it's my job to pick one.
Okay, we'll try and squeeze in as many as we can. We'll start with Damien, we'll go to Ian and then Craig.
Hi Eddie, just going back to Chris Wood, was selling him in hindsight an indication of how you were going to have to trade throughout this period, or was it just a case that you were looking to go a different way at the time?
Well, definitely trading is something I've said many times we have to do. It's not a choice. We have to trade players out, and at that stage, we had to trade players out as a necessity. Obviously, the necessity was building upwards as we approached the next window. But also there was the side for Chris, because Chris was at that stage not getting the game minutes that he wanted, and it was his big push really to want to go rather than my wish to lose him.
Okay, Ian?
Morning, Eddie. Still on the Chris Wood theme, did you ever, you're clearly an admirer of the player, but did you ever envisage him being up there with Haaland, Isaac and Salah in the goal scoring charts?
I never doubted Chris's ability. Hence, when he was here, before obviously the signing of Alex, and depending on Callum's availability, he played regularly for us and he played very well. Now, he didn't score the goals that he's scoring now, but he was such a pivotal part of the team. And I think I remember sitting here on a regular basis saying how good I thought he was for us. And the fact we were winning games in part, the number that we were, was down to his general performance was very strong. But as I said earlier, I think it's the variety of goals that he scored has been so impressive. Totally different array of goals, which is making him a difficult player to mark. And that's someone that, for our perspective, our defenders are going to have to play very well against him this weekend.
And why didn't he score the goals for Newcastle, which he is doing for Forest and he did for some of his previous clubs?
Well, I can never give an answer to that because I'm not behind the scenes at Nottingham Forest. But for us, he played his role in helping probably other players score more goals than he did himself. He was very selfless for us. He played an incredible role, and I think he supported the team and his teammates unbelievably well here.
Okay, we'll to Craig, Jason and then Louise.
Morning, Eddie. We spoke to you down at the Etihad last week about the possibility, be it subconsciously or otherwise, of players playing with one eye. On the cup final, you said you wanted time to digest that theory. Have you this week? And what would your message be to any player who perhaps does think the place is guaranteed for Wembley?
The reason I laugh is I should never say that to you, Craig, should I? That I need time to digest, because then you always want an answer the other side. Yeah, the cup final is irrelevant for me. absolutely irrelevant in terms of looking back at Manchester City. We just have to look at Manchester City in isolation, and the isolation of that game. I don't think we were aggressive, but we weren't aggressive enough. We didn't follow through with our actions enough. I thought we got to a certain level of our off the ball play, but it stopped at a certain point, and we lacked that bravery, I think, to really fully implement what we wanted to do. And that actually left us in a more vulnerable position. So for whatever reason, we didn't fully commit, and that would be the same on the ball. I don't think we fully committed on the ball. I don't think we were brave enough on the ball. So I think there's a lot of stuff to grow from that game, both in and out of possession, that we're trying to put right for the next game. And that for me, the cup final is not part of that.
You say that about the cup final, and that's understandable given where you are in the league. You know, a lot of what we ask and talk about is framed in the context of the cup final, but you've still got the Champions League there. And you said, I think it was in September, any player who's got ambitions to be a Champions League player, well, achieve it here first. Does that message still stand?
Of course it does, from my perspective. Everything's about us and Newcastle, and I can't look beyond anything other than this season and in this moment. And the challenge for us and the coaching staff, the players, is to finish as high as we can in the league, and our target should be what's immediately ahead of us and above us. We have to try and chase down teams like Nottingham Forest and the various teams that we have above us in the league. That's a small target of points. I don't think it's impossible for us to achieve it. But certainly the game we have coming up is potentially a big moment in that, because if we let our immediate opposition slip away from us, as in Nottingham Forest, it becomes very, very difficult to make that gap up. So important games for us coming up in the next few weeks.
Jason?
Hi, Eddie. Just a bit more colour on Chris Wood's time at the club, really. Was he a joker? Was he on the end of jokes? I know he's a proud New Zealander. Did you chat cricket with him? Was he trying to hijack the playlist and get in Crowded House and Kiri Takano were on the playlist, stuff like that? So getting the lads to do a haka before a game?
Well, actually, one of my vivid memories of Chris talking about the haka was him in his initiation moment doing the haka. Hugely impressive thing. He's such a big lad that he was fully engaged, fully aggressive, and he delivered it to a really high standard. Now, I think Chris is a character. Chris is a strong person, and that's why when he came into the club, when we were in a desperate position in the league, he immediately solidified the group. You need strong characters in that moment. You need players that have been in that position many times before. But he rolled his sleeves up. He went to work. And I think he could be really proud of his time at the club. I think people too often look at statistics and sort of draw their judgment from just numbers. Chris's time isn't defined by that for me. He's defined by what he did to the group and how he helped us stay in the league.
Thank you. We'll go to Louise, Lee, and then Mark. Louise?
Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Louise.
I'm just wondering, you've got a sort of minor gap between the Brighton game and the West Ham game on the Monday night. Are you thinking about taking the team away somewhere warm to sort of decompress, have a rest, and maybe work on tactics in the sun?
Be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
No, we're not. No, we're not. I think you've got to remember we've got an international break coming up pretty soon after that, and the players will be travelling all over the world for their countries. So I don't necessarily think travelling at that moment will benefit the players. So we'll do our intense work in the sun here.
Yeah. So you think sometimes these things can be counterproductive?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in taking the players away and working with them with minimal distractions and staying with the players for longer, which is obviously the benefit of travelling to a destination. But I think you have to sort of try and read the schedule of what the players have beyond and before that, and work out whether it's the right time to do it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Lee?
Eddie, I know it was Real Madrid who dismantled Man City the other night, but did you look at that game with a bit of regret that your team wasn't able to have that flying start, given what was said before the game and how vulnerable Man City have looked this season?
Yeah, I never said anything about Manchester City being vulnerable. For me, I think I said post-game, for me, they're still the best team in the build-up, and I think the team that they played against us was a very strong team. And we didn't, as I said in my answer earlier, I don't think we were brave enough. We were brave to a point, but we weren't brave enough. And that fearless approach has become part of our identity. We have to have that in every moment against every opposition. I can't talk too much about Real Madrid. They're a different level to us, but we have to certainly learn from that game.
On this game, Nottingham Forest sometimes play 5 across the midfield. Could patience be the key word going into this game?
Yeah, I think patience is important at home you never know how the game's gonna go. You never know what position we're going to be in. You'd love to think positive and think, we can really attack the game and express ourselves in a really good way and be the team that we want to be. But we have to be adaptable. If that's the case, then we'll have to do that. And patience could be a key thing for us.
Thanks, Lee. We've got Mark and Luke and Scott, please.
You talked there about Champions League. How transformative would it be for the club to get back in there? And is that a really motivating factor for you with these next few games?
Yeah, transformative. Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but it would certainly help in every aspect. It would help us continue our journey really in a positive way, continue to build on the experiences that we had in our previous campaign. And I think it would help the evolution of the club. For me, it's a big motivation. It's a big driver. We want to achieve. We want excitement. We want the season to have a great end in lots of different ways. And we want to give ourselves the best chance to do that in various competitions. So that's why it's important we get our Premier League form back on track.
You mentioned there about home form as well. How important is a quick start at home? Because it seems like when you come out the blocks, the crowd lift and the whole sort of feeling of the game is different.
Yeah, so it's an important thing, and I think it's a two-way thing. If we can get the crowd in the game, if we can start the game well, obviously it transforms the feeling. And a lot of the time, the players are playing on feelings. They're playing on the feeling of the stadium. They're playing on the feeling of their own emotion. So we have to try and make that as positive as we can.
Thank you. Luke?
When your team's good, it can be brilliant. But when it's off it can be sort of an infuriating side to watch. Is it infuriating for you?
I'm just trying to think if I would describe it as infuriating. I think there's a frustration there, and I think there has been at different times this season, of course. But I think the players share that. They're human. They share the emotions that I share when they watch a performance. It's either elation or it's disappointment. Very rarely for us this season it's been in the middle. There's been very rarely middle ground. But you have to understand the game that we're in. It is that kind of game. For most teams in the Premier League this year, probably apart from Liverpool, and you look at a couple of other teams who've had outstanding seasons like Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth and teams like Fulham. Everyone else has had those moments where we've been frustrated and then we have to come back and be strong again. The league is so tough and everyone's expectations are different as well. So we can only live in our world, and our world is that we've had some really good games, we've had some disappointing games, but we're just looking to generally improve our performances and be more consistent. And the challenge starts this weekend.
Just finally, are you still confident that your players got the strength of character, the focus to have a positive reaction like they have done previously to setbacks this season?
Yeah, I don't doubt the players in terms of character. I said that earlier. I think we've got a brilliant group of people who want success. We're not perfect. We've got a very small squad. We've got challenges. But I've never shied away from the fact that I really believe in the players we have.
We've got Scott, Chris and then Martin.
Hi Eddie. You spoke about Elliott a few times and how excited you were by him and obviously how hurt you were to lose him. Do you see the same level of potential in Lewis? Can he get to where Elliott is now as a kind of nailed-on regular Premier League starter? And how much of Lewis's development over the next year, 18 months, is going to be dictated by whether or not he can force his way into this team? Because there is an argument that for all he's clearly done really well, if Elliott had stayed here, maybe he would not have played that much football this season, given how well the rest of your midfield's done.
Yeah, let me start at the beginning. I think Lewis can be, at this moment, anything he wants to be. I think that the bar is that high for him. When I watch him in training, as we do, of course, every day, you see the level of player we have. The challenge for him, and I've said this many times, is he's got to break into a midfield of Sandro Tonali, Bruno, Joelinton when he's fit, Joe Willock, Sean Longstaff. You know, it's a really good group of players. And to get ahead of those starting players is not easy, but it will be a testament to his ability if he can and how quickly he can. Certainly doing himself no harm by coming onto the pitch as he did against Manchester City and having the strength in that kind of game to showcase his abilities. Yeah, I get your point. But Elliott broke into our team at the back end of last season and was really beginning to show his level of ability, his attacking level of ability that he has, and he's taken that on to another level, partly because he's played every week, of course, Louis is a totally different player to Elliot. I wouldn't compare them both, but Louis got standout qualities.
Thanks, Scott. Chris? Morning, Eddie. You said that they made it clear to the players this week about what went wrong last week. What does that actually look like in terms of, I know you do a lot of analysis looking at the last game and looking at the opposition, but if you have a real down performance like that, how long do you linger on it? Are they made to watch through the entire game again, like that sort of cliched sit and watch through the entire match? What does that actually look like?
No, I wouldn't make them sit down and watch the whole game, because I think that's sometimes negative. I'm a big believer in one-to-one meetings, being very direct with what I like and what I don't like, and that works both ways, by the way. That's just not in negative moments, that's in positive moments. So very direct feedback, and then of course there's a time for when the whole group needs to hear certain things, so we've done a bit of both this week.
Okay, thank you. Martin?
Morning, Eddie. As an ex-centre-half, would you have fancied facing Chris straight after he did his hacker?
Wonder where that was going then. I never shied away from a challenge as a player, but probably looking at the level I played at, I'm not sure I'd fare too well against Chris.
And you've used that phrase already. Is it bittersweet that both Chris and Elliot have been so crucial in creating a Champions League chasing rival?
Yeah, not so much for Chris, I think, but definitely for Elliot, because different stage of his career. And Elliot wasn't a player, I've said many times, that we wanted to lose. So it's always a difficult one with ex-players, because I always wish them well, especially players that give everything for me in my time. You can't not wish ex-players to go on and further their careers and enjoy the rest of their time in the game. But now we're competing against them, so of course we want to win.
Thank you. I've got Kieran, Jordan, Dom. Yep.
Morning, Eddie. You know these players very well, but I imagine you're making assessments every day still. How important is it for them to continue to impress before the summer?
Before the summer was the last bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to impress every day. That's their job. So you can't live off past performances. I very much have to take my eyes for what I see every day and make daily assessments to then lead to the next game, and I've always lived by that. And then we move on to the next game, and I'm making those assessments again. So I think there's big motivations at the moment for the players to do well. We have big games coming up. I'm sure all of them want to be involved in those games. So I think there's a lot of sort of good opportunities for them to prove that they want to be in the team and stay in the team.
And does it feel this season that there's maybe a spot open for Forest or Newcastle to kind of disrupt?
Yeah, I always think there's a spot for us. Not any other team. There's a spot for us for sure if we want it enough and we're good enough. The opportunity is there.
Thanks, Kieran. Jordan?
Heidi, does this game have a big game feel to it, and can that benefit your players?
Well, if it doesn't, there's something wrong. It's a massive game for us. Teams above us in the league, we're chasing Nottingham Forest down. They've had a brilliant season. So if we don't look at it that way, there's a problem. We can't underestimate the challenge. This is a huge game.
Tom?
Morning, Eddie. You've touched on the new contracts of your players, two of your most experienced players in the squad. You've got several other players out of contract, your most experienced and oldest players. Looking at the medium to long-term future of your squad, how important is it to find that balance between experience but then also bringing the average age of the squad down?
Yeah, it's always a big thing. I think when we first came to the club, there was a big group of players who were in their early 30s, and that's always a problem if you're outnumbered in any way, too young or too old. It can create long-term problems. So there may be a readdressing of that, as there was always a readdressing of that, because players get older, unfortunately. So yeah, we're constantly looking at youth and potential new signings, but of course there is a big place for experienced players in the squad. They have to be there because they have been there and done it, and they can lend a lot of experience on, but they also set the culture, and then usually the big leaders in the group as well. So we have to get that balance right.